Are you a reverent person? It is an odd question, perhaps one you haven't been asked before, or at least not lately. So I ask it again. Are you a reverent person? It may help with the question if I define what I mean by the term reverence. The simplest definition of the term is this: reverence is to hold a deep respect for something or someone. But I think it is a bit more complex than a lot of respect. Respect is part of it, and often we might say that it is the closest word to what we mean when we say we revere something. But I think there is more to it than that. In the book Reverence, A Renewing of a Forgotten Virtue by author Paul Woodruff, he describes what reverence is with more nuance than we often have in our daily lives. He defines reverence as the well developed capacity to have the feelings of awe, respect, and shame when these are the right feelings to have. To have a good connection to the virtue of reverence is not just to have a whole lot of it, but to have the right amount for the right moment. One can revere a corrupt person, one that they should not. One can revere an object they should not, placing too much value on material things. What about that shame part? We don't talk a lot about shame in our congregations. What is meant here is the capacity to feel when we've messed up, when we've held our own selves too highly, or placed our reverence upon the wrong person or situation. To feel when reverence has crossed the line into hubris. So shame is part of helping us know when we've gone off course from true reverence. But when we have the right amount of reverence in the right moment, things are aligned in such a way that good decisions are made and people work together more in a community. So to practice reverence is about holding the right amount of awe and respect for the right people or things in the right moments of life. Not too much, not too little. You may be asking yourself why I'm going on about this virtue this particular morning. That's because I believe that mindfulness helps us to be reverent in the right amounts at the right times. As Mary described in her homily, there are many practices one can weave into their lives to be more mindful. But why do this at all? I believe that being mindful helps us to be more reverent, and the two form a pattern that reinforce one another. Walking in nature, as Clara spoke about in our Time for All Ages, and Mary talked about in her homily, is a good example. By walking more mindfully, we notice the world more. The trees along our path become more pronounced. The birdsong in the air is no longer simply background noise. It is something to cherish for a moment or two. The sunlight through the canopy, or the blooming flower scented on the breeze. All of this sensory input is no longer filtered out in our hurry to get to our next destination. Instead, the moment we are in becomes the destination, and one that can be more fully appreciated and more fully experienced if we can slow down and pause in it. When we can experience the world more fully, we can appreciate all that exists in it more fully too. And when we can do that, we can hold on to feelings of awe, of wonder, of respect for what we are encountering. We can hold with reverence the world in which we find ourselves. And when we can hold with reverence this world and this life in which we experience it, we then get closer to being able to hold with reverence the other people in it too, the other beings we find along the way, those trees and that jogger, and the child being pushed in the stroller. Practicing holding ourselves and those nearest to us in reverence can lead us to holding that circle of appreciation, of respect, wider still. What would the world look like if our leaders held us with reverence rather than as votes to be counted? What might it look like to hold the natural world with reverence when deciding on our environmental policies? If those who teach and are taught are held in reverence, how might we prioritize our schools? If human life was held with more reverence, how might the murder of community members in Minneapolis and Chicago by police and the mass shooting in Indianapolis become impossible rather than far too frequent? On some level, the idea of reverence is a lofty one that could be over-intellectualized. The idea of mindfulness can feel like good self-care, and it is, but ultimately it is about more than the individual. I think the practices of mindfulness and the goal of understanding what reverence is are incredibly connected to the real-world challenges we see all around us. If we were more mindfully reverent, we might be better at understanding how our choices impact others during a pandemic. If we are more mindfully reverent, we might connect how our society as a whole chooses to use its resources with how we personally want the world to operate. If we practice reverence in a mindful way, we begin to see how our breath connects us to all that is, and how appreciating what is before us in this moment allows us to create a better future. May we hold in reverence all of life. May we know when hubris finds us, and may we practice discerning our way back. Just like our breathing, we know when we are in balance, and we know when we are not, if we slow down enough to listen. So may it be.